He thought she was a nobody, just a quiet, supportive wife he could discard for a younger, flashier model when he reached the top. Richard Sterling handed his wife divorce papers on the night of their 10th anniversary, laughed in her face, and threw her out of their mansion for his secretary. He told her she was worthless without him. But Richard made one fatal calculation error. He never bothered to ask who his wife really was before he married her. He didn't know that the woman he called pathetic held the keys to his entire existence. This isn't just a breakup story. It's the brutal, satisfying unraveling of a man who didn't realize he was sleeping next to the boss. You're going to want to sit down for this one. The rain in Seattle was relentless that evening, battering against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite atop the Sterling Dynamics building. It was the kind of weather that chilled the bone, but Genevieve Sterling barely noticed. She was too focused on the small velvet box in her hand and the dinner reservations at Canlis she had secured 3 months in advance. Today was their 10th anniversary. A decade. 10 years ago, Richard Sterling was a desperate man with a crumbling startup and a mountain of debt. Genevieve had met him in a coffee shop, a frantic, sweating mess, trying to pitch an algorithm to an investor who wasn't listening. She had bought him a scone, listened to his dreams, and eventually she had married him. She had been his rock. She had lived frugally, stitched his suits, and comforted him through every failed prototype until Sterling Dynamics suddenly and almost miraculously took off 5 years ago. Now Richard was the tech darling of the Pacific Northwest, worth millions, and Genevieve. She was the quiet woman in the background, the one the tabloids called plain compared to the glamorous socialites Richard now rubbed shoulders with. The elevator chimed. Genevieve stepped out into the private lobby of Richard's office, shaking off her umbrella. She usually didn't come here unannounced, but tonight was special. Mrs. Sterling. The voice was sharp-clipped. Genevieve looked up to see Jessica Miller sitting at the executive assistant's desk. Jessica was 24, stunningly beautiful, in a way that seemed manufactured, perfect teeth, perfect hair, and a dress that cost more than Genevieve's entire wardrobe. Jessica had been Richard's secretary for 6 months. In that time, Richard's late nights had doubled. "Hello, Jessica," Genevieve said with a warm, tentative smile. "Is Richard in?" "We have dinner reservations at 7. Jessica didn't stand up. She didn't smile back. She just tapped a pen against her chin, looking at Genevieve with an expression that sat somewhere between pity and amusement. "He's in, but I don't think you'll be making that dinner, Genevieve." She dropped the formal Mrs. Sterling. That was the first red flag. Before Genevieve could ask what she meant, the double oak doors to the CEO's office swung open. Richard stood there. He looked impeccable in his bespoke Italian suit, but his eyes were colder than the rain outside. "You're here," Richard said, checking his Rolex. "Good. Saves me a courier fee." "Richard." Genevieve stepped forward, clutching the velvet box. "Happy anniversary. I thought—" "Stop," Richard cut her off, raising a hand. He walked past her toward Jessica's desk and rested his hand possessively on the secretary's shoulder. Jessica leaned into his touch, smirking openly now. Genevieve froze. The air left the room. "Richard, what is this? This?" Richard said, picking up a thick manila envelope from Jessica's desk and tossing it at Genevieve's feet. "Is the end. I'm filing for divorce, Jenna, on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. Though if we're being honest, the difference is that I'm a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and you're you." Genevieve looked at the envelope on the floor, then back at her husband. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "I don't understand. It's our anniversary. I stood by you when we had nothing. I ate ramen with you in that studio apartment for 3 years. And that was fine for then. Richard sneered, walking around the desk to stand next to Jessica. But look at you, Jen. You wear department store clothes. You don't know how to talk to my investors. You're an anchor dragging me down. I need a partner who fits the brand. Someone like Jessica. Jessica giggled a sharp, cruel sound. Sorry, Jen. Richard and I have been together since the Q3 retreat in Aspen. We're in love. Real love. Not whatever sad little arrangement you two had. Aspen, Genevieve whispered. You told me you were sick in the hotel room the whole weekend. I lied, Richard said casually. Look, let's make this easy. You signed a prenuptial agreement 10 years ago. Remember? I signed it because you were terrified of your debt ruining my credit score, Genevieve said, her voice trembling. I signed it to protect me from your failures. Well, turns out, it protects my successes from you. Richard laughed. It states that in the event of a divorce, you leave with exactly what you brought into the marriage, which, if I recall, was a beat-up Honda Civic and a checking account with $200 in it. He stepped closer, looming over her. You have 1 hour to vacate the house. I've already had security pack your things, the cheap things. The jewelry I bought you stays. The car I bought you stays. You're out, Jennen, tonight. Genevieve felt a strange sensation. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was shock at the sheer monstrosity of his ego. You're kicking me out on our anniversary without a penny. You can have the Uber fare to your sister's trailer park or wherever it is you people go. Jessica chimed in, handing Richard a glass of scotch. Genevieve looked at Richard one last time. She looked for the man she had loved, the man who cried in her arms when his mother died, the man she had believed in when the world laughed at him. That man was dead. In his place was a monster fueled by greed and validation. She reached down, picked up the divorce papers, and stood up straight. The trembling in her hands stopped. You are making a mistake, Richard, she said softly. Her voice wasn't pleading anymore. It was hollow, eerie. The only mistake I made was not doing this sooner. Richard scoffed, turning his back on her. Get out of my building. If you're not out of the house by 8 o'clock, I'm calling the police to have you removed for trespassing. Genevieve turned and walked to the elevator. As the doors closed, she saw Richard kissing Jessica, the two of them clinking glasses to celebrate the destruction of a decade-long loyalty. She stepped out into the rain, the divorce papers shielding her head. She didn't cry, not yet. She just walked to the curb, pulled out her old cracked smartphone, and dialed a number she hadn't called in 10 years. The taxi dropped Genevieve off at a nondescript motel on the outskirts of Seattle. It was all she could afford with the cash in her wallet. Richard had already cut her access to the joint credit cards. The notification had popped up on her phone during the taxi ride. Card declined. She sat on the lumpy mattress of room 104, the neon sign outside buzzing with a headache-inducing hum. She opened the manila envelope. Richard's lawyers, Pendleton and Associates, had been thorough. They had itemized everything she was losing. The house in Medina, the vacation home in Tahoe, the Tesla. They had left her with nothing, or so they thought. Genevieve walked to the bathroom mirror. She looked tired. Her brown hair was frizzy from the rain, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked like exactly what Richard said she was, a defeated middle-aged housewife with no prospects. God, I look awful, she whispered. Then a dry, humorless chuckle escaped her lips. She reached into the lining of her battered purse, a purse Richard had constantly told her to throw away because it looked poverty-stricken, and pulled out a small metallic object. It looked like a SIM card, but thicker black with a gold chip. She powered down her phone, removed her current SIM card, and inserted the black one. When the phone rebooted, the background image changed. Gone was the picture of her and Richard from their honeymoon. In its place was a sleek minimalist crest, a silver hawk clutching a key. She dialed a number. It rang once. Status. A deep, gravelly voice answered. No hello. No identity verification. The voice knew exactly who was calling. Code breaker. Genevieve said, her voice shifting. The softness was gone. The hesitation was gone. In its place was the clipped, aristocratic tone of a woman who had been trained in Swiss boarding schools and boardroom warfare since she was 6 years old. Authentication, Genevieve, Alpha, Blackwood, 49. There was a pause on the other end, followed by the sound of typing. Identity confirmed. It has been a long time, Miss Blackwood. 10 years, 3 months, and 4 days. The family assumed you were compromised. I was undercover, Arthur. You know the terms of my grandfather's will. I had to live as a commoner. I had to find a partner who loved me for me, not the Blackwood trillions. I had to build a life without the safety net. And, the voice asked, did you succeed? Is Mr. Sterling the one? Genevieve looked at the divorce papers on the bed. No. Mr. Sterling is a cliché, a narcissist who thinks he's a self-made god. I see. I take it the experiment is over. The experiment is over, Genevieve said, her eyes hardening. Initiate the extraction protocol. And Arthur, yes, Miss Blackwood, prepare the dossier on Sterling Dynamics. I want a full audit of their financials, their shareholders, and their debt structure. Specifically the angel investment round from 5 years ago. The anonymous funding that saved the company. The funding provided by Orion Holdings. Arthur asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. The shell company you established with your trust fund allowance? Exactly, Genevieve said. Richard thinks he built that company with his own grit. He has no idea he's been playing in my sandbox the entire time. He kicked me out, Arthur. He left me with nothing but the clothes on my back. He thinks I'm destitute. Oh dear, Arthur said, though he didn't sound sympathetic towards Richard at all. That was unwise of him. The board has been waiting for your return. Your father, well, the chairman is eager to step down. He's been keeping your seat warm. I need a car, Genevieve said. And clothes. I'm currently at the Starlight Motel on Route 99. It smells like mildew and bad decisions. I will have a team there in 20 minutes. Shall we alert the media? No. Genevieve said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. Not yet. Richard has a big shareholder meeting coming up next week to announce their new AI integration. He wants to show off his brand. I think I'll make an appearance. Understood. Welcome back, Miss Blackwood. The line went dead. Genevieve set the phone down. She walked back to the mirror. She wasn't Genevieve Sterling, the pathetic, discarded wife, anymore. She was Genevieve Blackwood. The Blackwood family didn't just have money. They were the kind of wealth that whispered. They owned banks. They owned politicians. They owned entire supply chains. The name Blackwood was rarely in the papers because they paid very good money to keep it out. They were the invisible hand guiding the market. And Richard was a flea on the back of a dragon. And he had just bitten down. 20 minutes later, the parking lot of the Starlight Motel was illuminated by headlights. But it wasn't a taxi. 3 black SUVs pulled up in perfect formation. 4 men in suits got out earpieces in place, moving with military precision. They secured the perimeter of the motel room door. The center SUV's door opened, and an older man stepped out. He wore a suit that cost more than the motel itself, and he carried a silver cane, though he walked with a vigorous stride. This was Arthur Pendleton, not the cheap divorce lawyer Richard had hired, but the real Arthur Pendleton, senior partner of the most exclusive law firm in New York and the consigliere to the Blackwood family. He knocked on room 104. Genevieve opened the door. Arthur bowed his head slightly. "Miss Blackwood, the car is ready." "Thank you, Arthur," she said. She didn't look back at the room. "We have a suite prepared at the Four Seasons until the main estate is readied," Arthur said, as he escorted her to the armored Mercedes. "And regarding Mr. Sterling, our analysts found something interesting." "Oh." Genevieve slid into the leather back seat. It smelled of fresh citrus and expensive leather, the scent of her childhood. "Yes. It seems Mr. Sterling has been embezzling funds from the company to pay for Miss Miller's lifestyle. High-end jewelry, apartments, cars. He's been categorizing them as R&D expenses." Genevieve laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time. "He's sloppy. He got comfortable." "Very sloppy. But there is more. The lease for the Sterling Dynamics headquarters. It's up for renewal next month." Genevieve's eyes lit up. Sterling Dynamics operated out of the sky-high tower, the most prestigious building in the city. The location was half of Richard's brand image. "Who owns the building, Arthur?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Arthur smiled, handing her a glass of chilled champagne from the car's console. "A real estate holding firm called Apex Realty, which is a subsidiary of Blackwood Capital. You own the building, Genevieve. You are his landlord." Genevieve took a sip of the champagne. It tasted like victory. "Don't renew the lease," she said calmly. "Actually, evict him. But not yet. Wait until the shareholder meeting. I want to deliver the news myself." "As you wish," Arthur said. "And the divorce papers. Let him think he's won for a week," Genevieve said, looking out the window as the convoy sped toward the city skyline, her skyline. "Let him parade Jessica around. Let him think he's the king of the world. It'll make the fall so much more entertaining." 3 days after kicking his wife out into the rain, Richard Sterling sat in his ergonomic leather chair, spinning a gold fountain pen between his fingers. The view from the 45th floor was spectacular, the Seattle skyline glittering like a circuit board below him. "You look tense, babe," Jessica cooed, walking into the office. She was wearing a new dress Yves Saint Laurent charged to the corporate account under Client Relations. She placed a latte on his desk. "I'm not tense," Richard lied, though a vein in his temple was throbbing. "I'm just annoyed. The bank called this morning. First Republic is freezing our line of credit pending an internal review. It's ridiculous. I've been their golden boy for 5 years. Jessica perched on the edge of his desk, crossing her legs. "It's probably just a glitch. You know how banks are. Besides, who cares about a credit line? The shareholder meeting is on Friday. Once you announce the AI integration, the stock will triple. You won't need a bank. You'll be the bank." Richard smiled, his ego sufficiently stroked. "You're right." Genevieve never understood this. She would be panicking right now, telling me to save money, telling me to downsize. She had a poverty mindset. She was small, Jessica agreed, tracing a finger down his tie. "You're big time, Richard." "Speaking of Genevieve," Richard frowned. "Have we heard anything? Is she begging for a settlement yet?" "Radio silence," Jessica said with a shrug. I checked her social media. She hasn't posted since 2018, but I expected at least a cryptic Facebook status by now. She's probably embarrassed, or living in her car. They shared a cruel laugh. Meanwhile, across the city, Genevieve was neither embarrassed nor living in a car. She was sitting at the head of a mahogany table in the boardroom of Blackwood Capital. The room was silent. 12 of the most powerful financial analysts in the country sat around her waiting. Genevieve looked different. The frumpy cardigans and sensible flats were gone. She wore a tailored charcoal power suit that accentuated a figure she had hidden for years. Her hair, previously pulled back in a messy bun, was now a sleek, sharp bob. She didn't look like a housewife. She looked like a predator. "Report," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made the junior analysts straighten their spines. Arthur Pendleton stood up, projecting a graph onto the screen. "We've completed the audit of Sterling Dynamics, Miss Blackwood. It's worse than we thought." "How bad?" "Richard has been cooking the books," Arthur explained. "He's been inflating user numbers to secure venture capital. The AI technology he claims to have. It doesn't exist. He's licensing a cheap third-party algorithm and rebranding it. If the shareholders find out, the stock goes to zero overnight." Genevieve drummed her fingers on the table. "He's a fraud. I knew he was incompetent, but I didn't think he was criminal." "There is more," Arthur continued. "His primary investor, Orion Holdings, which is secretly you, holds a convertible note. This note matures tomorrow." Genevieve smiled. It was a cold, terrifying expression. "Remind me of the terms of that note, Arthur." "If Sterling Dynamics fails to repay the principal loan of $50 million by the maturity date, Orion Holdings has the option to convert the debt into equity. Specifically, 51% of the voting stock." "Does Richard know the note matures tomorrow?" "He received a notification," Arthur said, "but our intelligence suggests he ignored it. He believes Orion Holdings is a silent partner who will just roll the debt over. He thinks he's untouchable." "Don't remind him," Genevieve commanded. "Let the deadline pass. When Friday's meeting comes, I want to own him. I want to own the chair he sits in, the desk he sleeps with his secretary on, and the very air he breathes." "Consider it done," Arthur said. "Oh, and one more thing. The Emerald City Charity Gala is tonight. Richard is attending. He spent $20,000 on a table to impress the board." Genevieve stood up. "Excellent. I think it's time I made my debut. Have the car ready, Arthur, and bring the emeralds, the real ones." Arthur bowed. "The grandmother's collection." A bold choice. "He wanted a trophy wife," Genevieve said, walking toward the door. "I'm going to show him exactly what a trophy looks like when it's out of his league." Back at Sterling Dynamics, Richard was yelling at his CFO. "What do you mean we can't pay the vendor?" Richard screamed, slamming his hand on the desk. "The accounts are frozen, sir." The CFO, a nervous man named Gary, stammered. "And there's a $50 million payment pending for Orion Holdings tomorrow. We need to call them. We need to ask for an extension." "I don't have time for this," Richard barked. "I have the gala tonight. I have to network. Just fix it. Gary, move money from the offshore account if you have to. Just make the problem go away until after Friday." "But sir, that's illegal." "Do I pay you to lecture me or to handle the finances?" Richard hissed. "Just do it." He hung up and adjusted his tie in the reflection of the window. He looked good. He felt powerful. A few banking glitches weren't going to stop him. He was Richard Sterling. He always won. He had no idea that the glitch was his wife, and she was just getting started. The Emerald City Charity Gala was the event of the season in Seattle. It was held in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. The room smelled of expensive perfume, old money, and desperation. Richard Sterling strode in with Jessica on his arm. Jessica was wearing a sparkly gold dress that was a little too tight, a little too loud for the conservative crowd, but Richard didn't care. He wanted everyone to see her. She was young. She was hot. She was proof of his virility. "Everyone is looking at us," Jessica whispered, beaming. "Of course they are," Richard said, puffing out his chest. "We're the power couple of the future." They made their way to table 4, a prime spot near the stage. Richard spent the first hour shaking hands, flashing his teeth, and pitching his revolutionary AI to anyone who couldn't run away fast enough. "Mr. Sterling," said Thomas Walker, the chairman of the board for Sterling Dynamics. Walker was an old-school businessman, grey-haired and stern. He looked at Jessica with distaste. "Where is Genevieve tonight? I was hoping to see her." "A lovely woman. Very grounding." Richard stiffened. "Genevieve and I have separated, Thomas. It was unfortunate. She couldn't handle the pressure of our growth. We're moving in different directions." Walker raised an eyebrow. "Separated just days before the shareholder vote. That's unstable, Richard. Investors don't like instability." "It's for the best," Richard said, quickly pulling Jessica closer. "Jessica here is my new vice president of operations. She's fully aligned with the company's vision." Walker didn't look impressed. "I see. Well, let's hope your presentation on Friday is convincing. There are rumors, Richard. Rumors about the financials." Before Richard could defend himself, a hush fell over the ballroom. The music softened. The chatter died down. Everyone turned toward the grand staircase. A woman was descending. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue velvet that hugged her frame like a second skin. It was backless elegant and screamed high fashion Oscar de la Renta custom. Around her neck sat a necklace that made the chandeliers look dim, a cascade of diamonds leading to a teardrop emerald the size of a quail's egg. It was the Blackwood emerald, a piece of jewelry that hadn't been seen in public since the 1950s. Richard looked up annoyed that someone was stealing his spotlight. He squinted. The woman's hair was different, her posture was regal, but the face... Richard dropped his champagne flute. It shattered on the marble floor, but he didn't hear it. "Genevieve," he whispered. Jessica followed his gaze. Her jaw dropped. That can't be her. She shops at Gap, Richard. That dress costs more than your car." Genevieve reached the bottom of the stairs. A phalanx of photographers immediately surrounded her, flashes popping like lightning. She didn't flinch. She smiled a cool, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She began to move through the crowd. The sea of people parted for her. Men who had ignored Richard all night were suddenly bowing to her, eager to kiss her hand. "Who is she?" Richard heard a billionaire investor whisper nearby. "I've never seen her before." "That's the Blackwood heiress," another man replied in a hushed tone. "The family is royalty. I thought she was a myth." Blackwood Richard's brain short-circuited. "No, that's Genevieve. My Genevieve. The one who clips coupons." Driven by a mix of confusion and fury, Richard pushed through the crowd, dragging Jessica with him. He intercepted Genevieve near the ice sculpture. "Genevieve!" he snapped, grabbing her arm. Two large men in tuxedos materialized instantly, stepping between Richard and Genevieve. One of them caught Richard's wrist and squeezed hard. "Let go!" the guard growled. "It's okay," Genevieve said, her voice smooth as silk. She signaled the guard to step back. She turned her cold gaze to Richard. "Hello, Richard. Jessica. I see you're enjoying the severance package I haven't signed yet." "What the hell is this?" Richard hissed, gesturing at her dress, the diamonds, the guards. "Did you spend our savings on a costume? Are you trying to embarrass me?" Genevieve laughed. It was a dark, melodic sound. "Your savings." "Richard, your savings wouldn't cover the insurance on these earrings." "Stop playing games," Richard demanded, though his voice wavered. "Why are people calling you Blackwood, and how did you get in here? This is a $5,000 a plate dinner." "I didn't buy a plate, Richard," Genevieve said, leaning in close. "I bought the charity. I'm the chairwoman of the foundation." Richard paled. "What? And as for the name," she continued, her eyes boring into his. "You never asked about my family, did you? In 10 years, you never asked why I didn't have parents at the wedding. You were too busy talking about yourself. You assumed I was nobody because I didn't flash money around. You assumed I was weak because I was kind. She took a step closer, forcing him to step back. My name is Genevieve Blackwood. My grandfather built the railroads this city was founded on. My father owns the bank you're currently overdrawn with. And me, I'm the woman who spent 10 years trying to love a man who only loved himself. Jessica found her voice, though it was shrill. You're lying. If you were rich, why did we live in that dump of an apartment? Why did you drive that Honda? Genevieve looked at Jessica with genuine pity. Because I wanted a life that was real. I wanted to build something. But you too, you prefer the fake, the shiny, the cheap. She signaled to a waiter who instantly handed her a fresh glass of champagne. Enjoy the party, Richard, she said, turning away. Eat up. It's the last free meal you're going to get for a very long time. Wait, Richard shouted, panic finally setting in. Jen, we need to talk. You can't just... I can, she said over her shoulder. Oh, and Richard, you might want to check your email. Orion Holdings just called in your loan. She walked away, the train of her velvet dress gliding over the floor where Richard's champagne glass lay shattered. Richard froze. Orion Holdings. The mysterious investor. The one that held the debt that could bankrupt him. She's bluffing, Jessica said, clutching his arm, her nails digging in. She's just trying to scare you. She's a nobody, Richard. She's the woman who cleaned your socks. Richard pulled out his phone with trembling hands. He refreshed his inbox. From Orion Holdings Legal Department. Subject notice of default and acceleration of debt. Dear Mr. Sterling, due to failure to remit payment by 5 o'clock, p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are exercising our right to convert all outstanding debt into Class A voting shares, effective immediately. A representative will be present at the Friday shareholder meeting to assume majority control. Richard dropped the phone. He looked at Jessica, then at the retreating figure of his wife surrounded by billionaires. She's not a nobody, Richard whispered, the blood draining from his face. She's the boss. The morning after the gala. Richard Sterling woke up with a pounding headache that felt like a hammer striking an anvil behind his eyes. He reached for the bottle of water on his nightstand, but his hand knocked it over, spilling liquid onto the expensive Persian rug. He groaned, sitting up in the master bedroom of the Medina mansion. For a fleeting second, he expected Genevieve to be there, rushing in with a towel, apologizing for the mess, offering him aspirin and a hot breakfast. Instead, the room was silent. Jessica was still asleep next to him, her mouth slightly open, a silk eye mask covering her face. She didn't stir. She wasn't the type to wake up early to comfort him. Richard grabbed his phone. It was 7 a.m. His screen was cluttered with notifications, but none of them were good. 12 missed calls from Gary C. F. Oat, 3 missed calls from Thomas Walker, board chairman. 1 email from Pendleton and associate subject representation withdrawal. Richard's stomach dropped. He tapped the email from his lawyer. Dear Mr. Sterling, due to a conflict of interest that has recently come to light regarding the opposing counsel, our firm can no longer represent you in your divorce proceedings or corporate matters. We advise you to seek new counsel immediately. Please note that very few firms in the state will litigate against the Blackwood estate. Good luck. Damn it. Richard threw the phone against the duvet. Jessica stirred, lifting her eye mask. Richard, what is it you're being too loud? My lawyer quit. Richard paced the room, running a hand through his messy hair. Everyone is quitting. They're terrified of her name. I called 3 other firms on the ride home last night. They all hung up on me the moment I said Blackwood. Jessica sat up, stretching languidly. Babe, relax. It's just a name. She's still the same woman who clipped coupons for tuna cans. She's probably just paying people to scare you. It's a bluff. You saw the diamond, Jessica. Richard snapped, losing his patience. You saw how they looked at her. That wasn't a bluff. That was power. So what? Jessica shrugged, getting out of bed and heading to the vanity. We have the shareholder meeting tomorrow. You're the CEO. You built the company. They can't just kick you out. Besides, I need your credit card. I have a spa appointment at 10, and the one you gave me yesterday got declined. Richard stared at her. For the first time, he saw her not as a trophy, but as a leech. The beauty that had intoxicated him a week ago now seemed shallow painted on. The cards are frozen, Jessica, he said coldly. We have no money until I fix this mess with the bank. Jessica froze a lipstick, hovering halfway to her mouth. She turned slowly. What do you mean, no money? I mean zero, nada, until after the meeting. Jessica's face hardened. Well, you better fix it fast. I didn't sign up for poverty, Richard. I'm not Genevieve. The mention of her name stung him. No, Richard muttered, grabbing his suit jacket. You certainly aren't. Richard arrived at the Sterling Dynamics headquarters at 8:30 a.m. He needed to prepare. He needed to rally the troops. If he could just crush the presentation, tomorrow's show the new AI mock-ups the board might side with him against a hostile takeover. He walked up to the private executive turnstile in the lobby and tapped his badge. Beep, beep. Access denied. He tapped it again. Access denied. What the? Richard slapped the badge against the reader. Mr. Sterling. Richard turned to see the head of building security, a man named Miller, whom Richard had barely acknowledged in 5 years. Miller, my badge is broken. Let me in. Miller looked uncomfortable. He shifted his weight, glancing at a piece of paper on the security desk. I can't do that, sir. We received a memo from the building owners this morning. All access credentials for Sterling Dynamics executive staff have been suspended pending a lease review. Lease review. Richard's face turned purple. I'm the CEO of the company that rents the top 10 floors. You work for me. Actually, sir, I work for Apex Realty, Miller said, his voice firming up. And the owners were very specific. No access for you until the shareholder meeting tomorrow. You're listed as a security risk. A security risk, Richard shouted, causing people in the lobby to stop and stare. I am Richard Sterling. This is my building. Not anymore, sir, Miller said, crossing his arms. Please leave, or I will have to call the police. And I think you know the new owners have a direct line to the commissioner. Richard looked around the lobby. Employees, people he had hired, people he had underpaid and overworked, were watching him. Some were filming with their phones. He saw smirks. He saw indifference. No one stepped forward to help him. He realized then how alone he was. He had ruled through fear and arrogance, and now that his crown was slipping, his subjects were enjoying the show. He turned and stormed out of the revolving doors back into the grey Seattle drizzle. He sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, until his knuckles turned white. He had nowhere to go. The office was locked. The lawyers wouldn't take his calls. The bank accounts were frozen. He pulled out his phone and dialed the one number he knew by heart. It rang. And rang. And rang. Hello. It wasn't Genevieve. It was a man's voice, smooth British and dripping with condescension. Who is this? Richard demanded. Let me talk to my wife. Mrs. Sterling, or should I say Miss Blackwood, is unavailable, Arthur Pendleton replied. She is currently in a strategy meeting regarding the dismantling of your legacy. Can I take a message? Listen to me, you old vulture, Richard snarled. Tell her I want a meeting, face to face, today. If she thinks she can steal my company, she's wrong. I have dirt on her. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them she's unstable." Arthur chuckled softly. "Mr. Sterling, please. We own the press. But if you wish to speak to her, you will have your chance. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Boardroom A. Don't be late. Oh, and wear a nice suit. It will be your last day in the corner office." The line went dead. Richard screamed, slamming his fists against the dashboard, screaming until his throat was raw. Friday morning arrived with the heavy atmosphere of an execution. The sky was a bruised purple threatening a storm. Richard Sterling walked into the conference room of Sterling Dynamics at 8:55 a.m. He had spent the night rehearsing his speech, drinking too much coffee, and arguing with Jessica, who had packed a bag just in case. Things went south. The boardroom was full. The 10 board members sat around the long oval table. Usually they would be chatting, eating pastries, checking their phones. Today they were silent. They looked at Richard with a mix of curiosity and dread. Thomas Walker, the chairman, nodded curtly. "Richard, please take your seat." Richard walked to the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone. I know there have been rumors, confusion, but I assure you today's presentation will clarify everything. We are on the brink of a revolution." "Sit down, Richard," Walker said, his voice unusually sharp. "I prefer to stand when I present," Richard said, flashing his practiced CEO smile. He reached for the remote to the projector. "You aren't presenting," a voice came from the back of the room. The double door swung open. Genevieve walked in. She wore a suit of white, stark, blinding white against the dark wood of the boardroom. It was symbolic. She was the cleansing fire. Behind her walked Arthur Pendleton and 2 other severe-looking lawyers carrying thick binders. "Genevieve," Richard said, his smile faltering. "This is a closed meeting for shareholders and board members. You have no business here." Genevieve didn't stop walking until she reached the other end of the table directly opposite Richard. She placed her hands on the mahogany surface. "I think you'll find I have more business here than anyone," she said calmly. Arthur Pendleton stepped forward, opening a binder. "As of 5:00 p.m. yesterday, Orion Holdings has exercised its convertible debt option. We have acquired 51% of the outstanding shares of Sterling Dynamics. We have also purchased the shares of 3 other board members who were eager to sell once they saw the real audit reports." 3 board members looked down at their laps, refusing to meet Richard's eyes. "This is a hostile takeover," Richard stammered. "You can't do this. I have a contract. I have founders' rights." "Your founders' rights were contingent on performance and solvency," Genevieve said. "You are insolvent, Richard. You're broke. And worse, you're a thief." She nodded to Arthur. Arthur tapped a key on his laptop, and the projector screen behind Richard came to life. It wasn't the AI presentation. It was a spreadsheet. "What is this?" Richard whispered. "This," Genevieve said, pointing a manicured finger at the screen, "is a record of the company funds you diverted to a private account under the name JM Consulting. J.M. Jessica Miller." The board members gasped. Murmurs broke out. $2 million in company funds, Genevieve continued, her voice rising with authority, spent on luxury apartments, cars, designer clothes, and vacations to Aspen. You listed them as research and development. Tell me, Richard, what research was Ms. Miller conducting at the Prada store? Richard felt the blood drain from his legs. That's a clerical error. I can explain. It was for client retention. It's embezzlement, Thomas Walker said, standing up. He looked furious. Richard, is this true? No, she's fabricating it. Richard pointed a shaking finger at Genevieve. She's just a vindictive ex-wife trying to ruin me. I am the majority shareholder, Genevieve corrected him icily, and my first motion as controlling owner is the immediate removal of Richard Sterling as CEO for cause. Do I have a second? Second, Thomas Walker said without hesitation. All in favor? Genevieve asked. Every hand in the room went up. Even the friends Richard thought he had on the board raised their hands. No one wanted to go down with the ship. The motion carries, Genevieve said. You're fired, Richard. Richard stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You can't. I built this. I am Sterling Dynamics. You are a liability, Genevieve said, and we are rebranding. Effective immediately, the company will be restructured under the Blackwood Technology Group. The doors opened again. This time it wasn't lawyers. It was 2 uniformed police officers, accompanied by the building security chief, Miller. Richard Sterling, one of the officers asked. What is this? Richard backed away, bumping into the whiteboard. We have a warrant for your arrest, the officer said, pulling out handcuffs. Charges of corporate embezzlement, fraud, and securities violations. Arrest, Richard shrieked. You can't arrest me, I'm rich. Actually, Genevieve said, watching him with a look of utter detachment. You have $42 in your checking account. I checked. The officers grabbed Richard's arms. He struggled, his dignity completely fracturing. Genevieve, Jen, please. He looked at her, his eyes wild with desperation. Don't do this. We were partners. I loved you. I'm sorry about Jessica. It was a mistake. She meant nothing. Please call them off. In the back of the room, the door cracked open. Jessica Miller had been listening. Upon hearing Richard throw her under the bus, she turned and ran down the hallway, the sound of her heels fading fast. She knew when to cut her losses. Genevieve walked around the table until she was standing inches from Richard. The police paused, letting them have a final moment. You never loved me, Richard, she said softly, so only he could hear. You loved the idea of someone who would clean up your messes. But I'm done cleaning. She reached into his suit pocket and pulled out the company ID badge he had managed to sneak in with. She tossed it onto the table. Get him out of my building, she commanded. As the police dragged Richard Sterling out of the boardroom, kicking and screaming about his rights, Genevieve didn't watch him go. She turned to the window, looking out at the city she now owned a significant piece of. The room was silent behind her. The board members were terrified, wondering who would be next. Genevieve turned back to the table. She sat down in Richard's chair, the head of the table. She smoothed her skirt and looked at the terrified faces of the men who had ignored her for years. Now, she said, her voice clear and commanding. Let's get to work. We have a lot of mess to clean up. 6 months had passed since the boardroom doors slammed shut on Richard Sterling's career. The Seattle rain was still falling, but for Richard, the view was very different. He wasn't looking out of a floor-to-ceiling penthouse window anymore. He was looking through the wire mesh reinforced glass of the visitation room at the King County Correctional Facility. He had been denied bail. The judge, a stern woman named Honorable Edith Clark, had deemed him a flight risk given his offshore accounts that Genevieve's forensic accountants had uncovered within 48 hours. Richard sat at the metal table, picking at a loose thread on his orange jumpsuit. He had lost weight. His hair, usually dyed and coiffed, was showing grey at the roots. The swagger was gone, replaced by a twitchy, nervous energy. The heavy steel door buzzed open. Richard looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. He was expecting his public defender. Or maybe Jessica. But it was neither. Arthur Pendleton walked in. He didn't sit down. He stood on the other side of the glass, placing a briefcase on the ledge. He looked at Richard with the clinical detachment of a mortician. "Mr. Pendleton," Richard said, his voice cracking. Are you here to represent me? Did Genevieve send you? I'm willing to settle. I'll sign anything. I just want out of here." Arthur adjusted his spectacles. "I am not here to represent you, Richard. I am here to deliver the final inventory of the asset seizure." "Seizure." Richard gripped the phone. "They can't take everything. The house in Medina is in my name." "Was," Arthur corrected. "The house was purchased with funds leveraged against company stock. Since the stock plummeted upon the revelation of your fraud, the bank called the note. And since the bank is owned by the Blackwood family, we have foreclosed." Richard felt like he couldn't breathe. "My car, repossessed. My watch collection, auctioned yesterday to pay for the legal fees of the employees you wrongfully terminated." Arthur said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "It raised quite a tidy sum. The staff was very grateful." Richard slumped back in his chair. "So I have nothing." "You have debt," Arthur clarified. "Approximately $4 million in personal liability restitution. You will be paying that off for the rest of your life, assuming, of course, you ever find employment after your sentence." "Where is she?" Richard whispered. "Where is Genevieve?" "She is in Paris," Arthur said, "attending the Global Tech Summit. She was named CEO of the Year. Blackwood Sterling, she kept your name on the building, by the way, is now the leading ethical AI company in the world. She kept my name." Richard blinked, a tear sliding down his cheek. "Does that mean she still cares?" Arthur laughed. It was a dry, brutal sound. "Oh, heavens, no. She kept the name as a warning, a reminder to the industry of what happens when arrogance meets competence. You are a cautionary tale, Richard, a museum exhibit of failure." Arthur tapped the glass. "One last thing. Miss Miller sends her regards." Richard's head snapped up. "Jessica, is she okay? Is she waiting for me?" "Miss Miller attempted to sell her story to Vanity Fair," Arthur explained. "Unfortunately, she signed a non-disclosure agreement when she joined the company. We sued her for breach of contract. I believe she is currently working as a hostess at a diner in Tacoma. She wanted me to tell you that you ruined her life." Arthur picked up his briefcase. "Goodbye, Mr. Sterling. Enjoy the state's hospitality." He walked out, leaving Richard alone in the grey room, listening to the hum of the vending machine and the silence of his own destroyed ego. 1 year later. The espresso machine at the Daily Grind hissed, filling the small coffee shop with the smell of roasted beans. It was the same coffee shop where, 11 years ago, a desperate Richard Sterling had met a kind woman named Genevieve. Genevieve sat at the corner table. She was wearing a cashmere sweater and jeans, looking younger and more vibrant than she had in a decade. She was reading a book, a cup of tea steaming beside her. There were no bodyguards visible, though 2 men in plain clothes were sitting quietly by the door, scanning everyone who entered. The bell above the door jingled. A man walked in. He was wearing a faded janitor's uniform, clutching a mop bucket and a wet floor sign. He looked exhausted, his face lined with premature aging, his hands rough. It was Richard. He had been released on early parole for overcrowding, but with a felony record for fraud, his options were limited to cleaning floors for minimum wage. He began mopping the entryway, keeping his head down. He hated this part of town. It reminded him of what he used to be. He moved the mop methodically, the grey water swirling on the tile. As he turned, he saw her. He froze. Genevieve looked up from her book. Her eyes met his. For a moment, the entire shop went silent. Richard felt a surge of old instincts, shame, then anger, then a pathetic desire to beg. He wanted to run to her, to fall on his knees, to ask for a second chance. He wanted to tell her he had changed. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something that stopped him cold. He didn't see hate. He didn't see anger. He didn't even see triumph. He saw indifference. She looked at him the way one looks at a stranger or a piece of furniture. He was no longer the center of her world. He wasn't even a villain in her story anymore. He was just nothing. Genevieve held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she politely nodded a small acknowledgement of his existence and turned her attention back to her book. She took a sip of tea. The dismissal was absolute. It was more painful than if she had screamed at him. It confirmed that he had no power over her, not even the power to upset her. Richard gripped the handle of the mop. His throat burned. He realized with crushing clarity that he was the only one still living in the past. She had ascended. "Hey, buddy! You missed a spot!" a customer shouted near the counter. Richard flinched. He looked back at Genevieve one last time, but she was already turning the page, lost in a world he could no longer enter. He turned away, dipping his mop back into the dirty water. "Coming," Richard muttered. Outside, the rain cleared, and a rare beam of sunlight hit the pavement. Genevieve watched through the window as Richard finished his shift and walked to the bus stop. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from a number saved as Davide. "Dinner tonight, I found a place that serves better risotto than Milan." Genevieve smiled. She typed back, "I'd love to. 8 p.m. She closed her book, left a $20 tip on the table for a coffee that cost $4, and walked out the door. She didn't look at the bus stop. She walked toward her car, breathing in the fresh, clean air of freedom. She had lost a husband, but she had found herself. And that was a trade she would make 1,000 times over. And that is the brutal, beautiful reality of karma. Richard thought Genevieve was a doormat because she was quiet. He mistook her patience for weakness and her humility for poverty. He didn't realize that the loudest person in the room is usually the most insecure, while the one holding the keys to the kingdom often sits in silence. Richard lost everything, not because he fell out of love, but because he fell in love with his own reflection. He forgot that the people you step on to get to the top are the same people you meet on your way back down. Only this time, they're the ones holding the ladder. Genevieve's story is a reminder to all of us. Know your worth and never let anyone treat you like an option when you are the priority. If you enjoyed this story of justice, served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about cheaters getting exactly what they deserve, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a upload. What would you have done if you were Genevieve? Would you have taken him back when he was at his lowest? Or was the janitor scene the perfect ending? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.